The fluorescent lights above my desk flickered for the third time that morning, each sputter sending a fresh stab of pain behind my eyes. I pressed my fingertips against my temples, trying to ward off the headache that had been building since 4 a.m., when Daisy's feeding pump alarm had woken me. Again. The bitter taste of gas station coffee lingered on my tongue as I typed another mindless expense report into the antiquated system at Sentinel Holdings, the nondescript financial firm where I'd worked as an administrative assistant for the past 8 months. 8 months of being invisible. The office smelled perpetually of old carpet and the cheap pine air freshener our office manager, Barbara, sprayed religiously every afternoon at 2 p.m. The scent made my stomach turn lately, though everything seemed to do that these days. Exhaustion, the doctor had said when I'd mentioned it during Daisy's last appointment. Stress and exhaustion, as if I needed a medical degree to figure that out. My fingers cramped as I continued typing, the repetitive motion pulling at the tendons in my wrist. I'd been at this for 3 hours straight, processing invoices that all looked the same, for companies I'd never heard of, in amounts that made my yearly salary look like pocket change. Not that I let myself think about that too much. Thinking led to comparing, and comparing led to the dangerous territory of wondering how different my life might have been if I'd made different choices. If I'd never met Marcus. If I'd finished my degree. If Daisy had been born healthy. I blinked hard against the burning in my eyes and reached for my coffee mug, only to find it empty again. The break room was down the hall, past Gerald's office, where he'd inevitably stop me to complain about something I'd done or hadn't done or had done wrong. The man had made an art form out of finding fault with my work, despite the fact that I'd never missed a deadline and rarely took sick days, even when Daisy's condition warranted it. I couldn't afford to take sick days. The elevator dinged in the distance, the sound barely audible over the low hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional ringing phone that no one ever seemed to answer. Our floor was always quiet, separated from the main Sentinel Holdings operation on the 15th floor. We were the overflow office, the place where they sent the administrative staff they didn't want cluttering up the prestigious executive suites upstairs. Or so I'd been told. Diana. Barbara's sharp voice cut through my concentration. Mr. Ricci's meeting was moved up. They need the conference room set up in 10 minutes, not 30. My stomach dropped. I glanced at the clock. 11:47 a.m. I'd planned to use my lunch break to call Daisy's physical therapist about the new exercises Dr. Martinez had recommended. Exercises that would cost an additional $200 per session, money I didn't have. Money I would never have. Of course, I said, keeping my voice steady as I pushed back from my desk. The chair squeaked, the sound grating in the silent office. Water, coffee, the usual? Barbara pursed her lips, her expression suggesting I'd asked something incredibly stupid. Mr. Ricci drinks Italian espresso. The machine is in the private kitchen attached to the conference room. And use the good china, not the regular cups. These are very important clients. Important clients. That's what she always said, as if any of the men who came through our conference room were anything less than powerful. I'd learned not to ask questions about who they were or what they discussed behind those heavy mahogany doors. I'd learned not to notice the way they looked at me when I served their coffee, as if I were part of the furniture, necessary, but unremarkable. I'd learned to be invisible. The conference room was at the end of the hall, past the unused offices that Sentinel maintained for reasons I'd never quite understood. As I walked, I felt the familiar ache in my lower back, the one that never quite went away anymore. Between working full-time, caring for Daisy, and the 3 hours of sleep I averaged each night, my body had become a catalog of small pains I'd learned to ignore. The conference room smelled of leather and expensive wood polish. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline, the view worth more than I'd earn in a lifetime. I moved quickly, arranging water glasses with mathematical precision, setting out notepads and pens that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The espresso machine gleamed in the corner of the small kitchen, all chrome and Italian design. I'd used it exactly twice before, both times under Barbara's critical supervision. My hands shook slightly as I measured out the coffee, and I had to pause, gripping the counter edge to steady myself. Breathe, Diana. Just breathe. The machine hissed and gurgled, producing tiny cups of espresso that smelled rich and bitter. I arranged them on a silver tray, alongside cream and sugar in delicate porcelain containers. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be invisible, just like me. I was adjusting the last spoon when I heard voices in the hallway. Deep, male voices speaking in rapid Italian. My limited high school Spanish was useless for understanding the conversation, but I recognized the tone. Business, serious, with an undercurrent of something harder. The door opened. I kept my eyes down, a skill I'd perfected over months of serving these meetings. Don't look. Don't engage. Don't exist beyond the function you serve. Grazie, Diana. My name in that voice, with that accent, sent a shiver down my spine that I immediately suppressed. I nodded slightly, still not looking up, and moved toward the door. Almost free. Almost invisible again. The coffee is perfect, as always. I had no choice but to acknowledge the comment. I looked up, preparing my practice smile, the one that said thank you without actually engaging, and found myself looking directly into the darkest eyes I'd ever seen. Dominic Ricci stood less than 3 feet away, tall and imposing in a charcoal suit that had clearly been tailored to fit his broad shoulders. His dark hair was swept back from a face that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture, all sharp angles and masculine beauty that seemed almost cruel in its perfection. But it was his eyes that held me frozen, intelligent and penetrating, studying me with an intensity that made me feel suddenly, terribly visible. "Thank you, sir," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He tilted his head slightly, a small gesture that somehow conveyed curiosity. "You're new." 8 months, sir. 8 months. He repeated the words as if testing them. "And in those 8 months, you've been invisible." My breath caught. Had he just... I notice everything in my buildings, Diana. The way he said my name, with that slight Italian emphasis on the second syllable, made it sound like a different word entirely. And I notice when people try very hard not to be noticed. Heat crept up my neck. Behind him, 3 men in expensive suits waited with the patience of people accustomed to their time being respected. I needed to leave. I needed to disappear back to my desk and my meaningless invoices and my safe, invisible existence. "If there's nothing else, sir, I should get back to work." "Of course." He stepped aside, allowing me to pass. But as I moved toward the door, he added, "Diana?" I paused, not turning around. "Take your lunch break today. You look like you need it." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order, delivered with the casual authority of someone who expected to be obeyed. I nodded and escaped into the hallway, my heart pounding against my ribs for reasons I couldn't quite name. Back at my desk, I tried to focus on the expense reports, but the numbers blurred together. My hands were still shaking. In 7 years of existing in the background of corporate offices, no one had ever looked at me the way Dominic Ricci just had. Like I was a person, not a function. Like I was visible. And that terrified me more than anything else possibly could. I didn't take a lunch break. How could I? The physical therapist's office closed at 5 p.m., and if I didn't call during business hours, I'd miss another day of trying to schedule Daisy's sessions. Another day of her asking me when she could start the exercises that might help her legs feel less sleepy, as she put it. Another day of failing her. Instead, I ate my usual peanut butter sandwich at my desk while typing with one hand, the taste of cheap bread and cheaper peanut butter mixing with the guilt that had become my constant companion. Through the wall, I could hear the low rumble of male voices from the conference room, punctuated occasionally by laughter that sounded more like warnings than amusement. At 2:47 p.m., my phone rang. The school. My stomach immediately knotted. "This is Diana." "Ms. Wells, this is Nurse Patterson at Riverside Elementary. Daisy is fine," she added quickly, knowing my panic too well. "But she's had another episode. Her legs are bothering her more than usual and she's quite upset. Can you come get her?" I closed my eyes, calculating rapidly. If I left now, I'd have to make up the hours tomorrow. If I stayed, Daisy would spend the rest of the afternoon in the nurse's office crying. There was no good choice. There never was. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. I hung up and gathered my things with mechanical efficiency, years of emergency school pickups having refined the process to a science. Purse, coat, phone, keys. I was halfway to the elevator when Barbara appeared, her expression already disapproving before I'd said a word. "I have a family emergency," I said, not asking permission because I knew what the answer would be. "Diana, Mr. Ricci specifically requested you handle the afternoon. My daughter is sick." The words came out harder than I'd intended. "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Barbara's lips pressed into a thin line, but she stepped aside. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of the conference room door opening, a figure in a charcoal suit stepping into the hallway. I looked away quickly, jabbing the lobby button repeatedly as if that would make the elevator descend faster. Daisy was waiting in the nurse's office, her thin legs dangling from the examination table, tears streaming down her face. At 7 years old, she was small for her age, the spinal muscular atrophy stealing not just her mobility, but her growth. Her dark hair, so like mine, was tangled from where she'd been running her hands through it nervously. "Mama," she sobbed when she saw me, reaching out with arms that still worked, still held strength. "My legs hurt so bad today. They wouldn't wake up at all." I gathered her into my arms, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, feeling the lightness of her body that always sent a spike of fear through my chest. Too light, too fragile. "I know, baby. I know. Let's get you home, okay?" The bus ride back to our apartment in Queens was torture. Daisy whimpered every time we hit a bump, her head pressed against my shoulder. Other passengers glanced at us with varying degrees of sympathy and discomfort, their eyes sliding away when I met them. People never quite knew what to do with visible suffering on public transportation. Our apartment building was one of those pre-war structures that had never been updated, the elevator perpetually broken, the hallways smelling of cooking oil and old newspapers. I carried Daisy up 3 flights of stairs, feeling each step in my burning thighs, in my aching back, in the desperate prayer that ran through my mind like a mantra. Please let there be a treatment. Please let there be hope. Please let me save her. I'd just gotten Daisy settled on the couch with her favorite blanket when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Hello?" "Ms. Wells." The voice was female, professional, unfamiliar. "This is Adriana Costa from Sentinel Holdings HR. I'm calling to inform you that you've been placed on paid administrative leave, effective immediately, pending a review of your employment conduct." The words didn't make sense. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your supervisor has filed a complaint regarding unauthorized absences and failure to complete assigned tasks. The review process will take approximately 2 weeks. You're not to return to the office until you receive clearance from this department." My vision blurred at the edges. But I had a family emergency. My daughter. "The complaint details a pattern of behavior, Ms. Wells. The review will examine your entire employment history. You'll receive an email with further instructions." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in numb disbelief. Paid leave meant I'd still get my salary, but 2 weeks of not working meant 2 weeks of not proving myself indispensable. 2 weeks for them to decide I was expendable. 2 weeks of Daisy asking why Mama was home instead of working. I made it to the bathroom before the tears came, pressing a towel against my mouth to muffle the sobs that felt like they were being torn from somewhere deep inside my chest. 7 years. 7 years of doing everything right, of never complaining, of being the perfect employee, the perfect mother, the perfect invisible woman. And it still wasn't enough. Daisy called for me from the living room, her voice small and scared. I splashed cold water on my face, forced my expression into something resembling calm, and went to her. She needed her medicine. She needed dinner. She needed her mother to be strong. She always needed me to be strong. It wasn't until after I'd gotten her to bed, after I'd read her 3 stories and sung her 2 songs and promised her that tomorrow would be better, that I let myself think about what came next. My laptop glowed in the dark kitchen, the screen showing my bank account balance, $240. 32. The physical therapy sessions cost $200 each. Daisy needed 2 per week. The math was simple and devastating. I was pulling up job search websites when my phone rang again. Another unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Ms. Wells, a male voice this time, older, with a faint Italian accent. My name is Vincent Costa. I'm Mr. Ricci's personal attorney. He's asked me to inform you that the complaint filed against you has been withdrawn. I sat up straighter, my exhausted brain struggling to process this information. Withdrawn? Completely. You're expected back at work tomorrow at your usual time. Additionally, Mr. Ricci has requested a meeting with you at 9 a.m. in his private office on the 15th floor. His private office? 15th floor, northeast corner. Security will be expecting you. He paused. Ms. Wells, I've worked for Mr. Ricci for 20 years. When he requests a meeting, it's in your best interest to attend. The call ended, leaving me staring at my phone in the darkness, my apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Dominic Ricci had intervened, personally, for me, the woman he'd seen for less than 5 minutes, whose name he shouldn't even remember. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt something else entirely, something that made my skin prickle with awareness and alarm. Visible. I'd spent 8 months being invisible, and now the most powerful man in the building had noticed me, and I had no idea whether that was salvation or disaster. The 15th floor of Sentinel Holdings was a different world. Where my floor was fluorescent and functional, this was all dark wood paneling and soft recessed lighting that made everything look like it belonged in a luxury hotel rather than an office building. My reflection in the polished elevator doors showed a woman who'd slept 3 hours, whose black dress was 2 years old and had been washed so many times the fabric had gone slightly shiny at the seams. I looked exactly like what I was, desperately out of place. Ms. Wells, the receptionist, an elegant woman in her 50s with perfect posture and a pearl necklace that probably cost more than my car, smiled with professional warmth. Mr. Ricci is expecting you. Through those doors, last office on the right. The hallway stretched before me, impossibly long, lined with abstract art that I recognized from a museum field trip I'd chaperoned with Daisy's class last year. Original pieces. In an office hallway. I walked slowly, my cheap heels clicking against marble floors, my heart hammering against my ribs with each step. The last office door was already open, revealing a space that looked nothing like the conference room where I'd served espresso yesterday. This was personal. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, the morning sun turning the city into something beautiful and golden. A massive desk dominated one side of the room, its surface clear except for a laptop and a single photograph in a silver frame. Leather furniture arranged near a fireplace created a conversation area that looked designed for comfort rather than intimidation. Dominic Ricci stood by the windows, his back to the door, wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that suggested he didn't spend all his time behind a desk. He turned when he heard my footsteps, and once again I felt the full force of those dark eyes studying me with an intensity that made breathing difficult. "Diana, thank you for coming," He gestured to one of the leather chairs. "Please sit." I perched on the edge of the seat, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. He moved to the chair across from me, not behind his desk, eliminating the power differential of furniture positioning. It was a deliberate choice, I realized. Everything about this man was deliberate. "I apologize for the confusion yesterday," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Barbara exceeded her authority. She's been transferred to a different department." My eyes widened. "You fired her?" "Transferred," he corrected, "to a position where her particular talents will be better utilized." He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "I don't tolerate people who abuse their power over those who can't fight back." The statement hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to examine. "Mr. Ricci, I don't understand why I'm here. You had a family emergency yesterday. Your daughter." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway, my grip tightening on my purse. "Tell me about her," he said softly. The request was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't respond. No one asked about Daisy. People avoided the subject, uncomfortable with childhood illness, with disability, with the reminder that terrible things happen to innocent children. "Her name is Daisy," I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant. "She's 7. She has spinal muscular atrophy type 2. It's a genetic condition that affects her motor neurons, makes her muscles weak. She can't walk anymore. I swallowed hard against the thickness in my throat. She used to be able to walk, when she was 4. But it's progressive." Dominic's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, softened imperceptibly. "And her father?" The question was gentle, but I felt its edge anyway. "Gone. He left a week after her diagnosis. Said he couldn't handle it, couldn't watch her decline. He sends a check occasionally, when he remembers." The bitterness leaked into my voice despite my efforts to contain it. "The last one was 7 months ago." "I see." He stood and moved to his desk, pressing a button on his phone. "Vincent, bring in the file." Moments later, the same older man whose voice I'd heard on the phone last night entered, carrying a manila folder. He handed it to Dominic with a respectful nod and left without a word, closing the door behind him. Dominic returned to his seat and opened the folder, though he didn't look at its contents. He already knew what was inside. Diana Wells, 29 years old, moved to New York from Ohio 7 years ago with Marcus Thompson, your then boyfriend. Daisy was born 6 months later. You worked as an administrative assistant at Hoffman and Crane law firm until Marcus left, then took a series of part-time jobs that allowed you to care for Daisy full-time until the medical bills became too much. You've been at Sentinel Holdings for 8 months, working 10-hour days despite your contract specifying 8. You've never called in sick. You've never complained. You've made yourself invisible. Each fact was delivered without judgment, but hearing my life reduced to bullet points made something tighten painfully in my chest. You investigated me. I investigate everyone who works in my buildings, he said simply, but I pay special attention to those who catch my interest. Why would I catch your interest? He closed the folder and set it aside, his gaze returning to mine with that same penetrating intensity. Because yesterday, after you left with your emergency, I went to check something in the file room, and I found you there, hiding between the cabinets, crying so hard you couldn't breathe. The memory crashed over me, mortification burning through my chest. I'd forgotten. After Barbara's call about the complaint, before I'd left to get Daisy, I'd ducked into the file room for just a moment, just long enough to let myself break. I thought I'd been alone. You were asking the same question over and over, he continued, his voice impossibly gentle. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? He paused. I want to know the answer to that question, Diana. What are you going to do? The tears came before I could stop them, hot and humiliating, spilling down my cheeks despite every ounce of willpower I possessed. I don't know, I whispered. There's a treatment. It's new, experimental, but it's working for some kids with Daisy's condition. It's called gene therapy, and it could stop the progression, maybe even help her regain some function. But it costs. I couldn't say the number out loud. It was too big, too impossible. $475,000, Dominic finished for me. I know. I had my people research it last night. I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. You research Daisy's treatment? I research everything. He leaned forward again, his presence somehow both comforting and overwhelming. Diana, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Can you do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. If you had the money for Daisy's treatment, if that obstacle was removed completely, would you still be working at Sentinel Holdings? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. If I had that kind of money, I'd be with Daisy every second I could be. I'd read to her, play with her, take her to the park even if she can't run anymore. I'd make up for every minute I've missed because I had to work to keep her alive. The words poured out, 7 years of grief and guilt and desperate love flooding through the cracks in my careful composure. I'd give her everything I can't give her now. Time. Attention. A mother who isn't too exhausted to enjoy being with her. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood and moved to his desk, withdrawing a checkbook from a drawer. I watched, numb and confused, as he wrote something and signed his name with a flourish. He handed me the check. I looked down at it, and the number made my vision swim. 475 euro. Euro. I can't, I whispered, though every cell in my body was screaming at me to take it, to run to the bank, to save Daisy. I can't accept this. Why not? Because I don't know what you want from me in exchange. The words came out harder than I'd intended, colored by years of learning that nothing in life was free, that every gift came with invisible strings. Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion I couldn't identify. Hurt, perhaps, or disappointment. I want nothing from you, Diana. No strings, no expectations. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and woody that made my head spin. I want you to save your daughter. I want you to have time with her. I want you to stop crying in file rooms because you can't figure out how to keep her alive. But why? My voice broke on the word. Why would you do this for someone you don't even know? He reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away, and wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected, that fresh tears spilled over. Because I know what it's like to lose someone you love to a disease you can't fight, he said quietly. My sister, Isabella, she died when I was 19 from leukemia. We had the money for treatment, but it wasn't enough. Sometimes money isn't enough, but sometimes it is. And when it is, and you have it, and you don't use it. He pulled his hand back. That's a sin I'm not willing to commit again. The confession settled between us, raw and honest. This wasn't charity. This was personal. I'll pay you back, I said, knowing even as the words left my mouth how ridiculous they sounded. I don't know how, but I will. I don't want you to pay me back. He returned to his chair, putting physical distance between us again. I want you to let me meet Daisy. I want to know that this matters, that I'm not just throwing money at a problem. I want. He paused, seeming to struggle with his words for the first time since I'd entered his office, I want to be part of this, part of her getting better. I clutched the check so tightly it crumpled in my hand. You want to meet her? If you'll allow it. No pressure, Diana. The money is yours regardless. But I'd like to meet the little girl who's strong enough to have you as a mother. Something in my chest cracked open. Something that had been locked tight for 7 years. The tears came harder now, sobs that shook my shoulders, and I couldn't stop them. Couldn't control them. Couldn't pretend to be strong for one more second. I felt Dominic move, felt him kneel in front of my chair, felt his hands cover mine gently. Let it out, he said softly. You've been holding it in for too long. Let it out. So I did. I cried for Daisy, for the life she'd never have, for the treatment that might save her. I cried for Marcus, for his betrayal and abandonment. I cried for myself, for the exhaustion and the fear and the desperate loneliness that had become my entire existence. And Dominic Ricci, mob boss and millionaire, crime lord and businessman, knelt before me and let me cry, his presence solid and steady and somehow impossibly safe. When the tears finally subsided, leaving me hollow and exhausted, he handed me a handkerchief embroidered with his initials. Thank you, I whispered, my voice raw. Don't thank me yet, he said, standing and returning to his chair. I haven't done anything except write a check. The real work begins now. Finding the right doctors, getting Daisy approved for the trial, making sure she gets the best care possible. That's going to take time and effort and resources. I'll do whatever it takes. I know you will. He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, less like the intimidating figure from yesterday. But you're not doing it alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be. I looked down at the check again, at the number that represented salvation and hope, and every prayer I'd whispered in the dark. I'd like you to meet Daisy, I said, if the offer is still open. It is. Tomorrow, after school, I could bring her here or we could meet somewhere else if that's easier. Bring her to my home, he interrupted. It's better suited for children and more comfortable than an office. He pulled a business card from his pocket and wrote something on the back. This is my private address. Come at 4 p.m. I'll have dinner prepared. I took the card with shaking hands, tucking it carefully into my purse alongside the check that would change everything. As I stood to leave, Dominic touched my arm lightly, stopping me. Diana, one more thing. You're no longer working as an administrative assistant. You're now my personal consultant for charitable initiatives, reporting directly to me. The salary is $150,000 a year. Your only job is to make sure Daisy gets better and to help me identify other families who might need the kind of help I'm in a position to provide. I opened my mouth to protest, to argue, to refuse this additional generosity, but he shook his head. It's not charity. It's a job. I need someone who understands what it's like to need help, who can identify genuine need from manipulation. You have that experience. Use it to help others. He paused. And take care of your daughter. That's the job. I couldn't speak, could only nod as fresh tears threatened to spill. Go, he said gently. Go deposit that check. Call the doctors. Start saving Daisy's life. I made it to the elevator before the tears came again, but this time they were different. This time, they tasted like hope. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork and desperate, disbelieving joy. The check cleared immediately, the bank manager actually coming out of his office to verify the amount, his eyes widening when he saw Dominic Ricci's signature. Dr. Martinez cried when I told her we could afford the gene therapy, actually broke down in her office and hugged me, whispering that Daisy deserved this miracle. Daisy herself didn't quite understand. How could she? She was 7 years old, and the concept of experimental treatment and genetic modification was too complex for her to grasp. What she did understand was that Mama was smiling for the first time in months, that the lines of worry around my eyes had softened, that something fundamental had shifted in our small universe. "Is it because of the prince?" she asked that night as I tucked her into bed, her dark eyes bright with curiosity. I paused, my hand stilling on her hair. "What prince, baby?" "The one who's going to save us, like in the stories." She smiled, her expression so pure and hopeful it made my chest ache. "Miss Carter at school says that sometimes princes appear when you need them most." "Is he real, Mama? Did a prince find us?" I thought of Dominic Ricci, of his dark eyes and measured words, of the way he'd knelt before me while I cried. A prince. The description was both absurd and somehow accurate. "Something like that," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Something like that." The next afternoon, I dressed Daisy in her favorite purple dress, the one with the butterflies that she'd outgrown slightly but refused to give up. I'd washed her hair and braided it carefully, and she looked beautiful and fragile, and so heartbreakingly small as I lifted her into her wheelchair. She could still walk short distances, but the effort exhausted her, and I'd learned to save her strength for when it mattered most, like meeting the man who was going to save her life. The address Dominic had given me led to a townhouse in the Upper East Side, the kind of building that whispered old money and established power. A black car had appeared outside our apartment at exactly 3:30, the driver introducing himself as Marco and refusing to let me take the subway. "Mr. Ricci insists," he'd said simply, in a tone that suggested arguing would be pointless. Now we stood outside the townhouse, a 4-story brownstone with ivy climbing the facade and window boxes full of late autumn flowers. The neighborhood was quiet, elegant, the kind of place where people walked small dogs and carried shopping bags from boutiques with names I couldn't pronounce. "It's pretty," Daisy breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the surroundings. "Like a palace." I rang the doorbell, my stomach twisting with nerves. What was I doing? Bringing my daughter to the home of a man I barely knew, a man whose wealth came from sources I was afraid to examine too closely. But he'd given us hope. That had to count for something. The door opened to reveal Dominic, dressed more casually than I'd seen him, in dark jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes look even darker. He looked younger this way, less imposing, though the aura of controlled power never quite disappeared. His gaze moved immediately to Daisy, and his expression softened in a way that made my breath catch. "You must be Daisy," he said, crouching down so he was at her eye level. "I'm Dominic. Thank you for coming to visit me." Daisy studied him with the frank, fearless assessment of children, her head tilted slightly. "You're very tall," she observed, "and you have nice eyes. They're sad, though. Like Mama's eyes are sad sometimes." I started to apologize, but Dominic smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face completely. "You're very perceptive," he said to Daisy. "Yes, I've been sad, but I'm hoping that meeting you might help with that. Would you like to come inside? I have something I think you'll enjoy." He stepped back, allowing me to maneuver the wheelchair through the door, and I found myself in an entrance hall that looked like it belonged in a museum. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in several lifetimes. But what caught Daisy's attention was the massive aquarium built into one wall, filled with colorful tropical fish that darted between coral and underwater castles. "Oh," she breathed, her whole face lighting up. "Mama, look! It's like Finding Nemo." "I installed it last year," Dominic said, watching Daisy's reaction with evident pleasure. "I find watching fish to be very calming. Would you like to see the rest of the house?" He led us through rooms that belonged in a design magazine, each one more beautiful than the last. But he moved quickly through them, clearly heading somewhere specific. We ended up in a sunroom at the back of the house, a space filled with natural light and comfortable furniture, and, in one corner, a small table set for 3. But what made Daisy gasp with delight was the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out onto a private garden, where a fountain bubbled gently, and birds flitted between carefully maintained plants. "It's beautiful," I said, the words inadequate. "It's my favorite room," Dominic replied. "I thought Daisy might enjoy it. And I had my chef prepare something special for dinner. I hope you like Italian food." Over the next 2 hours, I watched something extraordinary happen. Dominic Ricci, the man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure, charmed my 7-year-old daughter completely. He listened to her stories about school with genuine interest, asked questions about her favorite subjects, and didn't flinch when she explained in clinical detail exactly what spinal muscular atrophy meant. "So my muscles don't work right because my body doesn't make enough protein," she concluded, repeating what Dr. Martinez had told her in simplified terms. "But the new medicine will fix that, right, Mama?" "That's what we're hoping, baby," I said, my voice thick. Dominic leaned forward, his expression serious. "Daisy, I want you to know something. The medicine is very new, and it's going to be hard sometimes. You'll have to go to the hospital, and there will be tests, and you might feel sick. But your mother is going to be with you every step of the way. And so will I, if that's okay with you." Daisy looked at him with those 2 wise eyes that had seen too much pain for someone so young. "Are you the prince?" she asked. He blinked, clearly surprised. "What?" "The prince who's going to save us. That's what I asked Mama last night. She said something like that." Daisy smiled. "I think you are. You have a castle and everything." Dominic's expression did something complicated, flickering through emotions too quickly for me to identify. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I'm not a prince, Daisy. I'm just a man who wants to help. But if you want to think of it that way, then yes, I'll do my best to be your prince." "Good," Daisy declared, as if that settled the matter. Princes always protect people. That's their job. After dinner, Dominic showed us more of the house, including a library that made Daisy's eyes go wide with wonder, rows and rows of books stretching to the ceiling. He pulled down a fairy tale collection and read to her, his deep voice bringing the stories to life in a way that made even me forget where we were, who he was. It wasn't until Daisy had dozed off in her wheelchair, exhausted from the excitement and the late hour, that Dominic and I finally had a moment alone. We stood by the window in the sunroom, watching the garden lights sparkle in the darkness. "She's remarkable," he said quietly. "Smart, brave, curious. You've done an incredible job with her." "I've done the best I could," I replied, my eyes on Daisy's sleeping form. "It never feels like enough. It's always enough." He turned to face me, his expression intense. "Diana, I meant what I said to Daisy. I want to be part of this, part of her recovery. I want to be there for the appointments, the treatments, the good days, and the bad days." My throat tightened. "Why? You barely know us." "I know enough." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "When I was 19, I watched my sister die slowly, painfully, while our family threw money at doctors who couldn't save her. I was young, powerless, and the guilt of surviving when she didn't has followed me every day since. I built an empire, made more money than I'll ever need, and none of it brought her back. None of it changed the fact that I couldn't save her." His voice dropped lower, raw with emotion. "But I can save Daisy. I can give her the chance Isabella never had. And maybe in doing that, I can find some kind of peace with the choices I've made, the life I've lived. I understood then. This wasn't about charity or even kindness. This was about redemption, about a man trying to balance the scales of a universe that had taken someone precious from him. Dominic, I said softly, you need to know that I'm not naive. I know who you are, what you do. I've heard the rumors about Sentinel Holdings, about what really happens on the 15th floor. He went very still, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. I don't care, I continued, the words coming faster now. I should care. I should be terrified. I should take Daisy and run as far away from you as possible. But I can't, because you've given us hope. And hope is the one thing I haven't had in 7 years. So whatever you are, whatever you've done, I'm choosing to trust you with the most important thing in my life. Don't make me regret it. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. Then Dominic reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and took my hand in his. His palm was warm, calloused in a way that suggested he didn't spend all his time behind a desk. I swear to you, on Isabella's memory, that I will never do anything to hurt Daisy, or you. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, the gesture both soothing and somehow intimate. You're safe with me, Diana. Both of you. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. Okay, I whispered. Okay. Marco drove us home that night, Daisy sleeping peacefully in my arms. As we pulled up to our building, I saw someone standing by the entrance, a figure I recognized with a jolt of shock and anger. Marcus. My ex looked older, rougher around the edges, his once expensive clothes now slightly worn. He straightened when he saw the car, his eyes widening when Marco opened the door and I emerged with Daisy. Diana, he said, taking a step forward. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. I moved toward the building entrance, but he blocked my path. I heard you came into some money, enough to pay for Daisy's treatment. His voice was careful, calculating. That's great news, really. But we need to discuss my role in her life, now that things are looking up. Maybe revisit the custody arrangement. There is no custody arrangement, I said coldly. You left. You abandoned us. You've sent exactly 3 checks in 7 years, totaling less than $2,000. You have no rights here. I'm her father. You're a sperm donor. There's a difference. His expression hardened. Be careful, Diana. I have rights, legal rights, and I have friends, lawyers who would be very interested in how you suddenly came up with $500,000. Questions will be asked, unless we can come to some kind of arrangement. The threat was clear. He wanted money, and he was willing to use Daisy to get it. Before I could respond, Marco moved, positioning himself between Marcus and me with a fluidity that suggested this wasn't his first confrontation. The lady has made her position clear, Marco said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made Marcus take a step back. I suggest you leave. And who the hell are you? Someone you don't want to know better. Marco's smile was cold. Leave now, or I'll make a phone call that will ensure you regret this conversation for a very long time. Marcus looked between us, calculation warring with fear in his expression. Finally, fear won. He backed away, hands raised in surrender. This isn't over, Diana, he said. I'll be back. But he left, disappearing into the night. I was shaking as Marco helped me inside with Daisy, my arms barely able to hold her. Upstairs, I got her into bed, still wearing her butterfly dress, too exhausted to change her. Then I collapsed on the couch, my phone in my hand, staring at Dominic's number. I should handle this myself. I'd always handled everything myself, but I was so tired of being alone. The phone rang twice before he answered. "Diana? What's wrong?" "Marcus showed up," I said, my voice breaking. "He wants money. He threatened to make trouble, to question where the treatment money came from. He's going to try to take Daisy." "No, he won't." Dominic's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "I'll handle Marcus. You won't see him again." "What are you going to do?" "Diana," he said gently, "don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. Just trust that it will be handled. Marcus Thompson will never threaten you or Daisy again. I promise." I should have been afraid, should have recoiled from the implied violence in his words. Instead, I felt only relief. "Thank you," I whispered. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start the process of getting Daisy approved for the trial. We have work to do." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, listening to the sounds of the city outside and the soft sound of Daisy breathing in the next room. I'd crossed a line tonight, accepting Dominic's protection, his intervention, his handling of Marcus. I'd stepped into his world, and there was no going back. But for the first time in 7 years, I felt like I wasn't drowning. And that was worth more than all the moral certainty in the world. True to his word, Marcus didn't return. I didn't ask what Dominic had done, and he didn't offer to tell me. All I knew was that 1 week after that confrontation, I received legal documents terminating Marcus's parental rights, signed and notarized, with a note from Vincent Costa stating that Mr. Thompson had been very cooperative once the situation was explained to him. I could imagine what that explanation had entailed. Meanwhile, Daisy's approval for the gene therapy trial came through with record speed, Dr. Martinez admitting with a bemused smile that she'd never seen paperwork move so quickly through the hospital bureaucracy. When I mentioned this to Dominic during one of our now regular phone calls, he simply said, "I made some calls," as if mobilizing an entire hospital system was something anyone could do. The first treatment was scheduled for a Tuesday in November, 3 weeks after that dinner at his townhouse. I'd expected to handle it alone, as I'd handled everything else. But when I arrived at the hospital that morning, Dominic was already there, standing by the entrance in a dark coat, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You didn't have to come," I said, though warmth bloomed in my chest at the sight of him. "Yes, I did." He handed me one of the cups, his fingers brushing mine briefly. "Where's Daisy?" "Marco is parking the car." The driver had become a constant presence in our lives, appearing whenever we needed to go anywhere, insisting that Mr. Asa Ricci had instructed him to be available. "She's nervous. She tried to hide it, but I can tell." "Of course she's nervous. She's 7 years old and about to undergo a medical procedure she doesn't fully understand." He paused. "Is it okay if I stay with her during the prep? It might help to have someone she trusts there." Someone she trusts. The phrase settled over me with unexpected weight. Daisy did trust him, completely and without reservation. Over the past 3 weeks, Dominic had become a fixture in her life, reading to her over video calls when I had to work, sending her books and puzzles and little gifts that showed he was thinking of her. He'd become part of our family so gradually, so naturally, that I hadn't noticed the transition until it was complete. "She'd like that," I said softly. The treatment itself took 6 hours. Daisy hooked up to monitors and IVs while the gene therapy was slowly introduced into her system. Dominic sat beside her bed the entire time, reading fairy tales and telling stories about his childhood in Italy, painting pictures of vineyards and old stone houses that made Daisy's eyes go wide with wonder. I watched from the corner, supposedly reviewing paperwork, but really just observing this man who had somehow become essential to us. The way he adjusted Daisy's blanket without interrupting his story, the way he made the medical staff laugh with dry humor, while never allowing them to forget that Daisy was their priority. The way he looked at my daughter with something that looked heartbreakingly like love. "Mama," Daisy called weakly from the bed, her voice thick with fatigue. Will you and Dominic both be here when I wake up? I moved to her side, taking her small hand. Of course, baby. We're not going anywhere. Good. Her eyes drifted closed. Because you're both my family now. That's what Miss Carter says happens when people take care of you. They become family. She fell asleep holding both our hands, mine and Dominic's, connecting us in a way that felt both terrifying and inevitable. After the nurses had settled Daisy in her recovery room and assured us she would sleep for several hours, Dominic suggested we get dinner in the hospital cafeteria. It was a surreal experience, eating institutional food with a man who probably had chefs preparing his meals, but he didn't seem bothered by the quality or the setting. How are you holding up? He asked, studying me across the small table. I'm okay. Scared, but okay. I picked at my salad, not really tasting it. The next few days will tell us if her body accepts the treatment or rejects it, if she develops a fever, if her blood work shows anything abnormal. She'll be fine, he said with such conviction that I almost believed him. You can't know that. No, he admitted, but I choose to believe it. The alternative is unacceptable. We sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the cafeteria washing over us. Then Dominic leaned forward, his voice dropping to something private and intimate. Diana, I need to tell you something. About who I am, about what I do. You said you didn't care, but you should know the truth. My stomach clenched. Dominic. Sentinel Holdings is a legitimate business, he continued, but it's only part of my organization. The other part, the part people whisper about, is real. I'm not going to detail what I do, but I need you to understand that I'm involved in activities that the law would classify as criminal. I have rivals, enemies, people who would hurt those close to me to damage my operation. He paused, his dark eyes searching mine. By accepting my help, by allowing me into your life and Daisy's, you've made yourself visible in a way that could be dangerous. I've taken precautions. Marco isn't just a driver, he's security. Your building is being watched. There are measures in place to ensure your safety. But you need to know what you're stepping into. I should have been afraid, should have grabbed Daisy and run as far away as possible. But instead, I felt a strange sense of calm. And if I told you to walk away? I asked quietly. If I said I wanted you out of our lives? Pain flashed across his face, quickly masked. Then I'd go. But I'd still make sure you were protected, that Daisy got her treatment. You wouldn't see me, but I'd be there, watching, making sure you were safe. That's what I thought. I reached across the table, taking his hand the way he'd taken mine. Dominic, I made my choice 3 weeks ago when I accepted your check. I knew what I was doing, what I was accepting. I'm not naive enough to think this is simple or safe. But Daisy is alive because of you. And for the first time in 7 years, I'm not alone. That's worth the risk. His hand tightened on mine. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. I held his gaze, letting him see the certainty in my expression. I'm saying that whatever comes next, we face it together. All 3 of us. Something shifted in his eyes. Something vulnerable and hopeful and almost desperate. Diana? My phone rang, cutting him off. Dr. Martinez's name flashed on the screen. I answered with shaking hands. Hello? Diana, it's Dr. Martinez. Daisy is having a reaction to the treatment. We need you in her room right away. We ran through the hospital corridors, Dominic keeping pace beside me, his hand at the small of my back both steadying and urgent. When we burst into Daisy's room, she was awake and crying, her small body shaking with fever. What's happening? I demanded, moving to her bedside. Her temperature spiked to 104, Dr. Martinez explained, her voice calm but concerned. It's a possible rejection response. We're giving her medication to bring down the fever and monitoring her closely. The next few hours are critical. I gathered Daisy into my arms, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. "It's okay, baby. Mama's here. You're going to be okay." But she wasn't okay. Over the next 6 hours, Daisy's condition worsened. The fever wouldn't break despite the medication. Her blood pressure dropped. Alarms sounded from the monitors with increasing frequency, bringing nurses running each time. And through it all, Dominic was there, standing beside me when I couldn't sit, holding my hand when I thought I'd shatter, speaking quietly to Dr. Martinez and the specialists who were called in, asking the right questions, demanding the best possible care. At 3 a.m., with Daisy finally sleeping fitfully and the fever beginning to drop, I collapsed into the chair beside her bed, exhausted beyond anything I'd ever experienced. Dominic draped his suit jacket over my shoulders, the fabric still warm from his body. "Rest," he said softly. "I'll watch her." "I can't sleep. What if... I'll wake you if anything changes, I promise." He positioned his chair so he could see both Daisy and me. "Trust me, Diana." So I closed my eyes, and despite every instinct screaming that I couldn't let down my guard, exhaustion pulled me under. When I woke hours later, sunlight was streaming through the window. Daisy was still sleeping, her breathing easier, her color better. And Dominic was exactly where he'd been, sitting vigil, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion but alert. "You didn't sleep," I said. "I promised I'd watch her." He smiled tiredly. "Someone had to make sure my girls were okay." My girls. The possessiveness in those words should have bothered me. Instead, it felt like coming home. Daisy's fever broke completely by evening, Dr. Martinez declaring the crisis over and calling the treatment a success, despite the rough start. Her body accepted the gene therapy, she explained, practically glowing with excitement. This reaction, while scary, is actually a good sign. It means her system is responding, adapting. We'll monitor her closely for the next few weeks, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Over the following weeks, the changes in Daisy were subtle, but undeniable. Her energy improved. The constant pain in her legs lessened. She started asking to try walking again, short distances with my support, and though she still tired quickly, there was progress. Real, measurable progress. And through it all, Dominic was there. Not just financially, though he'd quietly paid every medical bill, every therapy session, every specialist consultation, but physically present, showing up for appointments, reading to Daisy during her rest periods, becoming as essential to her recovery as the medicine itself. He was also becoming essential to me in ways I was afraid to examine too closely. The realization hit me one evening in early December. We were at his townhouse, Daisy asleep on the couch after another session of physical therapy. Snow was falling outside, transforming the city into something magical and clean. Dominic and I sat by the fireplace, glasses of wine in hand, comfortable in a silence that felt like intimacy. "Thank you," I said softly, breaking the quiet. "For everything. For Daisy. For being here. For..." I gestured vaguely, unable to articulate the enormity of what he'd given us. "You don't need to thank me." He set down his wine glass and turned to face me. "Diana, I need you to understand something. What I'm feeling for you, for Daisy, this isn't charity or obligation. It's not about my sister or redemption or balancing some cosmic scale." He moved closer, his dark eyes intense in the firelight. "I'm falling in love with you. With both of you. You've become the center of my world, and I don't know how to go back to who I was before I found you crying in that file room." My breath caught. "Dominic, you don't have to say anything," he continued quickly. "I know this is complicated. I know I come with danger and darkness. I know you have Daisy to think about. But I needed you to know how I feel. What you mean to me." I should have been careful. Should have protected my heart and Daisy's. Should have maintained the distance that would keep us safe from the inevitable pain of loving someone like him. Instead, I leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. But when his hand came up to cup my face, when he kissed me back with a gentleness that belied his reputation, something inside me surrendered completely. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you too," I whispered. "God help me. I love you too." His smile was brilliant, transforming his face into something beautiful and young. "Then let me be part of your family. Officially. Let me be Daisy's father in every way that matters. Let me be your partner, your protector, your everything." I thought of all the reasons to say no. The danger, the complications, the reality of who he was and what he did. But then I looked at Daisy, sleeping peacefully, her body healing because of him. I thought of the past weeks, of his unwavering support and constant presence. I thought of how he made me feel safe, cherished, loved in a way I'd never experienced. "Yes," I said. "Yes to all of it." And when he kissed me again, with Daisy sleeping nearby and snow falling outside, and the fire warming us both, I knew I'd made the right choice. Whatever came next, we would face it together, all three of us. 3 months later, on a cold morning in early March, I stood in Dr. Martinez's office and received the news that would change everything. "The gene therapy has exceeded all our expectations," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Daisy's muscle function has improved by 40%. Her respiratory capacity is up 35%. The progression of the disease has not just stopped, it's actually reversed in some areas." I couldn't speak, couldn't process the magnitude of what she was saying. Beside me, Dominic squeezed my hand, his own voice thick with emotion when he asked, "What does this mean for her long-term prognosis?" "It means that with continued treatment and therapy, Daisy could regain most of her lost function. She may never be completely typical, but she could walk, run, play like other children. She could have a normal life." The tears came then, huge sobs that shook my entire body. Dominic pulled me against his chest, holding me as I cried 7 years of fear and grief and desperate hope. A normal life. My baby could have a normal life. That evening, we told Daisy the news in the sunroom at Dominic's townhouse, the three of us curled together on the sofa. She listened carefully as we explained in simple terms what the doctors had said, her small face serious. "So my legs will work again?" she asked. "For real?" "For real," Dominic confirmed. "It will take time and hard work, but yes, your legs will work again." She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she looked up at him with those 2 wise eyes. "You kept your promise. You saved us, just like a prince." Something in his expression cracked, vulnerability showing through. "You and your mother saved yourselves. I just helped a little." "You helped a lot," she corrected firmly. Then, with the directness of children, "Are you going to marry Mama?" I choked on air, my face flushing hot. "Daisy!" But Dominic smiled, that beautiful, transformative smile I'd come to love. "Would you like that, if I married your mother?" Daisy nodded enthusiastically. "Then you'd be my real daddy, not just someone who helps. My actual daddy." "I'd like that very much," he said softly, his eyes finding mine. "If your mother would have me." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was too fast, too soon, too everything. We'd only been together 3 months. There were so many complications, so many unknowns. But when I looked at Daisy's hopeful face, at Dominic's expression of vulnerable longing. I couldn't find a reason to say no. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Daisy shrieked with delight, launching herself at both of us, her small arms wrapping around our necks. "I'm getting a daddy, a real daddy who won't leave." Over her head, Dominic mouthed, "I love you." "I love you too," I mouthed back. The engagement was quick and private, a simple dinner at the townhouse where Dominic slipped an antique diamond ring onto my finger, his hand shaking slightly. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "I've been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment." "This is perfect," I assured him, watching the diamond catch the light. But perfect didn't last long. 2 days after the engagement, Vincent Costa appeared at the townhouse with his perpetually serious expression and a file folder that made my stomach clench. "We have a situation," he said, glancing at me apologetically before addressing Dominic. "Marcus Thompson has resurfaced. He's hired a lawyer and is filing for emergency custody of Daisy, claiming that Diana is living with a known criminal and exposing his daughter to dangerous influences." The blood drained from my face. "He can't. He signed away his rights." "Those documents were obtained under duress, according to his legal team," Vincent continued. "They're alleging coercion and threatening a broader investigation into Mr. Ricci's business practices if the custody claim isn't successful." Dominic's expression went deadly cold, a transformation so complete it was like watching a mask fall into place. This was the man people feared, the man whose reputation made grown men nervous. "Where is he now?" Dominic asked, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Staying at the Hilton Midtown with his legal team. He's scheduled a press conference for tomorrow, planning to play the concerned father fighting to save his daughter from organized crime." "No," I said, my voice rising with panic. "He can't take her. He abandoned us. He doesn't get to come back now and destroy everything." Dominic turned to me, his expression softening marginally. "He won't take her. I promise you that." "How can you promise? If he goes public, if he makes accusations, then I'll handle it." The steel in his voice left no room for argument. "Vincent, cancel my meetings for tomorrow. I'll deal with Marcus personally." After Vincent left, I paced the sunroom, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What are you going to do? What I should have done months ago. Dominic pulled out his phone, making a call. "Marco, I need you to arrange a meeting, tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., at the usual place. And Marco, make sure Mr. Thompson understands that declining the invitation would be unwise." He hung up and turned to find me staring at him with wide eyes. "Diana, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" "I trust you," I said immediately. "But Dominic, please don't do anything that what? That crosses a line?" His laugh was bitter. "My love, I crossed that line a long time ago, long before I met you. The question is whether you can accept what I'm willing to do to protect our family." Our family. The word sent a shiver through me, equal parts fear and something darker, something that acknowledged the truth. I would accept anything he did if it meant keeping Daisy safe. "Do what you need to do," I whispered. The next morning, Dominic left before dawn. He kissed me gently, his hand lingering on my cheek. "Stay here with Daisy. Marco will be outside. By noon, this will be over." He didn't come home until evening. When he finally walked through the door, there was nothing in his appearance to suggest violence or confrontation. He looked exactly the same, composed and controlled, except for his eyes, which held something hard and satisfied. "It's handled," he said simply, pulling me into his arms. "Marcus has withdrawn his custody claim and his allegations. He's leaving the city tonight and won't be returning." "What did you do?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. I explained the consequences of his actions. Thoroughly. He pulled back to look at me. He won't bother us again. Not ever. I made sure he understood what would happen if he did. I should have pressed for details, should have demanded to know exactly what threats had been made, what lines had been crossed. But relief made me weak, and I simply held him tighter, grateful that the threat had been eliminated. Daisy appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. She'd been napping, exhausted from her morning therapy session. "Dominic, you're back." He lifted her easily, settling her on his hip with the natural ease of someone who'd been doing it for months. "Hello, piccola principessa. Did you have a good nap?" "Yes. Mama said you had business. Important business." She looked at him seriously. "Were you protecting us? Like princes do?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. I was protecting you and your mother. And I always will. No one will ever hurt either of you. I promise." She kissed his cheek with absolute trust, and my heart clenched watching them. This was my family now. This dangerous, complicated, imperfect family. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the garden of the townhouse, a small, private ceremony with only a handful of guests. Daisy served as flower girl, walking down the aisle with only minimal support. Her progress over the past months nothing short of miraculous. She wore a princess dress in pale pink, her face glowing with joy. I wore a simple ivory dress, elegant but understated, with my hair swept up and Isabella's pearl earrings, the ones Dominic's mother had given me, gleaming at my ears. Dominic wore a charcoal suit, his eyes never leaving mine as I walked toward him through the garden. The ceremony was brief, conducted by a judge who'd known Dominic's family for decades. When it came time for vows, Dominic took my hands in his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Diana, 7 months ago, I found you crying in a file room, asking a question you couldn't answer. What am I going to do? Today, I want to give you a new answer. Whatever comes next, whatever challenges we face, you'll never have to figure it out alone. You and Daisy are my heart, my purpose, my redemption. I promise to protect you, to cherish you, to be the father Daisy deserves and the husband you need. For the rest of my life." Tears streamed down my face as I spoke my own vows. Simpler, but no less true. "Dominic, you saw me when I was invisible. You gave us hope when we had none. You became family when we needed one most. I promise to stand beside you, to trust you, to love you despite and because of everything you are. For the rest of my life." When the judge pronounced us husband and wife, Dominic kissed me with a gentleness that belied his reputation, his hands cradling my face as if I were something precious and fragile. Daisy cheered from her seat in the front row, clapping her hands with delight. "You're really my daddy now. Really, really." Dominic broke the kiss to look at her, his expression soft with love. "Really, really," he confirmed. The reception was intimate, held in the sunroom with fairy lights strung everywhere, and Daisy's favorite foods alongside the elegant Italian cuisine Dominic's chef had prepared. At one point, Dominic carried Daisy onto the makeshift dance floor, slow dancing with her while she giggled and rested her head against his shoulder. Dr. Martinez, one of the few non-family guests, found me watching them. "You've built something beautiful," she said softly. "Against all odds." "I didn't build it alone," I replied, unable to tear my eyes from my husband and daughter. "No," she agreed, "but you were brave enough to accept help when it was offered. That takes a different kind of strength." As the evening wound down and Daisy fell asleep in Dominic's arms, exhausted from the excitement, he carried her upstairs to the bedroom that had become hers in the townhouse. We'd officially moved in 2 weeks ago, leaving behind the cramped Queen's apartment for this space that felt like a dream. I followed them up, watching as Dominic laid Daisy gently in her bed, removing her princess dress and pulling her nightgown over her head with the practiced ease of a parent. She barely stirred, completely trusting even in sleep. "Love you, Daddy," she murmured, the word so natural now it no longer made me cry every time I heard it. "Love you too, Principessa," he whispered, kissing her forehead. We stood together in her doorway, watching her sleep, and I felt the weight of the past 7 months settle over me. Everything had changed. Everything was different. And somehow, against all logic and reason, it had all turned out right. Later, in our bedroom, as Dominic slowly removed my wedding dress with reverent hands, he paused to look at me. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. I thought of Marcus's threats, of the danger that came with loving a man like Dominic, of the complications we'd face in the years ahead. I thought of the moral compromises I'd made, the lines I'd crossed, the willful blindness I'd embraced about certain aspects of his business. "None," I said honestly. "Not one." "Good." He kissed me slowly, thoroughly, his hands mapping my body with possessive tenderness. "Because you're mine now. Officially. Completely. You and Daisy both." "And you're ours," I whispered against his mouth. "Don't forget that part." He smiled. That beautiful smile that I'd come to know meant I'd surprised him, pleased him, touched something deep inside he usually kept hidden. "I could never forget that," he promised. "You two are the reason I breathe." That night, as we made love for the first time as husband and wife, I felt the last of my reservations fall away. This was my life now. This man, this child, this complicated, imperfect family we'd built from desperation and hope. 3 months later, Dr. Martinez discharged Daisy from active treatment, declaring her stable and thriving. She could walk unaided for short distances now, though she still used her wheelchair for longer outings. Her energy was that of a typical 8-year-old, and she'd even started ballet classes at a studio that specialized in adaptive dance. The day she danced in her first recital, moving across the stage with careful but confident steps, Dominic gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. Tears streamed down both our faces as we watched our daughter, perform with a joy and freedom we'd once thought impossible. "You did it," I whispered to him. "You saved her." "We did it," he corrected. "All 3 of us together." That night, after Daisy had gone to bed clutching her participation trophy, Dominic and I stood on the terrace of the townhouse, looking out over the city lights. "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice careful. "I've been making changes. To my business, to my organization. Vincent has been helping me transition the more problematic aspects into legitimate operations. It's going to take time, and I'll never be completely clean. But I'm trying, Diana, for you and for Daisy. I want to be the man she thinks I am." I turned to him, seeing the vulnerability in his expression, the hope that I wouldn't be disappointed by this confession that he wasn't transforming as quickly as he'd like. "You already are the man she thinks you are," I said firmly. "You're her father, her hero, her prince. And that's not because of what you do or don't do for a living. It's because you showed up. You stayed. You loved us when we needed it most." He pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me with that possessive gentleness I'd come to crave. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," I agreed with a small smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway." "Good," he murmured against my hair. "Because I'm never letting you go, either of you." 5 years later, I would stand in the same garden where we'd been married, watching Daisy run, actually run, across the grass with her younger brother toddling after her, his dark hair and serious expression marking him unmistakably as Dominic's son. I would feel Dominic's arm around my waist, feel his hand resting protectively on the swell of my belly where our third child grew, and I would remember that day in the file room when I'd asked, "What am I going to do?" The answer, I'd learned, was simple and profound. You let yourself be found. You accept help. You trust that sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms, from unexpected people, in unexpected moments. You let yourself be visible. And when the right person sees you, really sees you, everything changes. Everything becomes possible. Everything becomes beautiful. Even the broken parts. Especially the broken parts, because in the end, it's the broken pieces that let the light in.